Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Andres Berman. Welcome to the show, Andres.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I've just been once again saying to Andres that his voice sounds like treacle. It's so silky smooth. It's a voice meant for radio or for podcast. And Andres has a podcast like me, so it's great to connect with a fellow adoptee and a fellow podcaster.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah,
thank you very much.
Are you looking forward to diving into that? So we spoke a month or so ago, I think it was, Andres, and we came up with this nice wide topic, right? So we've got lots to explore off of growth. So what does growth mean to you, Andres?
So growth means to me, growth is basically when, the way I see it, is when you've gone through something that's difficult and it doesn't always have to be unpleasant, but it might be difficult. And growth is when you learn from that and you're able to move past that and learn from your mistakes or learn from the situation as a whole. So that's what growth means to me.
Yeah. Have you come across this term, post-traumatic growth? Have you heard of that?
I've heard it in certain circles. Yes, I have.
Yeah. Because I think, to me, when I saw that, I thought, finally, right, something that's optimistic. Something that, there's so much in psychology that is a negative, that gives us a downer. Right? Finally, we've got something called post-traumatic growth, and I googled it, right, to see how many mentions there were of post-traumatic growth compared to post-traumatic stress disorder, and which is a term we hear far more, I think. And sure. I can't remember what the exact ratio was, but I think it was something like 1,000 to 1. So there were billions. There were billions of results for PTSD, and perhaps millions of PTSD, because the UK billions and British billions are slightly different. But anyway, it was a factor of something like 1,000 to 1. So we have this cultural fixation on the negative, and stuff that is positive, like post-traumatic growth, doesn't really get a look in. Have you got has this occurred to you? Have you got a take on that, Andres?
Yeah, I think. Well, because we've all heard about post-traumatic stress disorder, but the other one is not as prevalent in society today yet. Now, I think as more people use it and it becomes more of our colloquial sort of speech, I think people will get a better hand on that. And as it gets used more and more, people will be able to relate to it or know somebody who could relate to it in the future. But I think it's just a time issue. It just needs more time to catch on.
Okay, yeah. A good point. I heard somewhere a couple of weeks ago that the idea of the world being round took 2,000 years to become the generally perceived view, right? 2,000 years.
Yeah, that's
yeah. Let's hope it doesn't take 2,000 years for post-traumatic growth to
yeah. Without getting into something political, I think it's humorous that back then, yes, we didn't have telescopes like we have now. We didn't have the satellites, and we hadn't been in space. But now we've been there and we've seen it. And it's how can you conceivably think that it's not round? I don't know.
So what was the what's your personal take on your personal growth? So we've got big picture and perspective and worldview and stuff. And what about you? How would you see your personal growth trajectory? That's not a word I've used very often. I'm quite proud to use it. Yeah. What's your personal growth story been like, Andre?
So my personal growth story is basically it was learning that I was adopted because my parents don't look anything like me, and it was reconciling that fact with the fact that I have two wonderful parents who really love me and care about me, and that was enormous for me, because they're such wonderful people. And the growth comes in where I realize what my life could have been like had I not been adopted. And so I've always been very grateful and very conscientious of how I live my life, because I want to make sure I do as much as I can right, given the opportunities that I have now, because I wouldn't have had a lot of opportunities that I have now had I stayed in where I was born, which is El Salvador.
Yeah. So you used the word reconciling there. What does that mean to you?
So it means that I weigh the pros and cons about what my life could have been like, and I look at the I guess the economics behind it, where it's not a rich country. It's not, where I'm from is not a place of wealth, and I probably would have struggled a lot. And so, having said that, I realize that I have such a wonderful life because of my adoptive parents, and they've given me chances and opportunities and ways to live my life that I could have never even have dreamed of had I lived or been born, or excuse me, raised in El Salvador.
Yeah. How do you see that? Your view of that gratitude. How do you see the gratitude in other adoptees? To what extent?
I think that as an adoptee, I think we all have some semblance of gratitude for where we've been, depending on our circumstances, because there are some circumstances where the adoptee has not been treated well and has gone through a lot of traumatic issues and whatnot. But for those who have had a good life, I think that we all of us that have had that opportunity, we all look at it and we look and we see that we've had chances that we wouldn't have had with somebody else. And so we're definitely very grateful for that.
Yeah. I think it clearly, as you say, you spot on the on with it. It's reflected in our experience. It depends on our experience. And I don't know. One of the things I see quite a lot of is adoptees being really cheesed off when that they've been told that they felt that they're being told to feel grateful, right?
Yeah.
And they don't feel grateful. So there's a mismatch between how they feel and what other people tell them that they should feel. And I think, well, on one sense, I can see the logic of that, and then the other sense, if we're waiting for somebody else to change, somebody else to change, so for them to stop telling us to feel grateful before we could be okay,
Yeah.
we're going to be waiting an awful long time. Right?
Yes. Yes.
We are kind of we're giving them more power over us than we need to do, right? And I don't think we're doing this intentionally. I don't think we're doing this on purpose. I think we just haven't figured that out. Nobody's kind of pointed it out to us that waiting for other people to change means a long way. And I heard a great, I think a quote from Churchill on this, which was, other people's opinion of me. What did he say? That's horrible. I can't remember now.
It's okay.
Yeah, other people's opinions of me is not my business, not my concern. Like, so if I focus in, Churchill's thinking, right? I focus in, and we focus in on what we can control. We can control the controllables, and we forget about the incontrollables and what other people think of us, how they say that we should be, how they feel about us, their opinions of us. It's none of our business, because we're going to be fighting a really losing battle if we try to change that time. It's like we're putting our happiness on hold, or a peace or contentment on hold, until they change their mind. And that's like just nuts, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. It really is.
How we do that.
Yeah, I think as far as other people's conceptions of me, that took time, because it took maturity to get to the point, and from speaking for myself, because I cared a lot about what people thought about me. And as I get older, I care less and less. And I'm pretty much at the point where like Winston Churchill, I just, I don't care. I really don't care. To some extent, there's a few people that I do care what they think about me, but for the most part, I do my best to be a good person. But if you don't like me, then you don't like me. That's fine. I've got a lot of other people that do. So
it's where we focus. It's not like we don't give a damn about them.
It's of course
we do give we give a damn about what we do, what we're doing. We're focused on what we can do, and not other people. And I think I'm on that curve, like you as well. And I had a breakthrough talking to another podcaster about this. And he said, I was comparing metrics. I was comparing numbers of downloads of my podcast compared to other people, another person. And Vin, an Aussie adoptee, said to me that I think you're getting the quality of your impact confused with the quantity of somebody else's impact. Right?
Yes.
And in that moment, it's something and a light bulb came on for me that my mentor has been trying to get me to look at for about 10 years, right? Where I realized that I would rather be doing this podcast my way than this other person's way. And that only happened just before Christmas last year.
Oh wow!
But for me, this is one of those things where it's not a once and done learning. It's the same learning at a deeper level.
Yes.
I
agree. I agree.
So you keep on getting the same lesson at a more holistic level, at a more profound level, at a deeper, deeper level. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
So, what do you think has helped you do this reconciliation? Help you go through the tough stuff?
That's I think that learning, I don't remember what age I learned that I was adopted. I mean, I could logically deduce the fact that my parents looked different than I, so I could figure that out. But I'm not sure when they told me, but I knew from a young age that I was different and that I came from a different place. Where did I come from? Well, once I figured out where I came from and did some research and heard stories, uh, and I found out that it's not an easy place to live. And it's so that's where I thought to myself, I could be there, I could be living there and trying to survive, but I'm not. I'm here in America with um, this wonderful land that we live on, and I have so many opportunities. And I think at a very young age, I realized that that is a phenomenal uh, concept because a lot of kids don't have that in other places in the world. And so I reconciled that by saying, I could be somewhere else a lot more unpleasant. And so I'm very grateful for what I have now. And it just kind of the pieces kind of fell together and it just worked out that way
Yeah,
where I was able to realize that, So
yeah.
that's how that happened.
So, because there's some different elements in here. I think we're touching on. We're talking about at one level, we're talking about economics, right? But at a more fundamental level, you're actually talking about survival.
Hmm.
So this isn't just an economic issue; it's something more,
Yeah.
more fundamental,
Yes.
more
Yes.
more fundamental.
Yeah. And I think the reason why I go to such a fundamental place in my mind is because when I was born, when I was born in El Salvador, I was in a hospital and my adoptive parents came and looking for a child to adopt. I was 6 months old and I was malnourished. I weighed the same at 6 months old. I weighed the same as a newborn. Um, and so I was, pretty sickly as an infant. And it took my parents a while once they adopted me to get me up to a healthy weight. But I think that in a very, I guess, primal way, I learned to feel grateful for what I have. I think it stems from that from a very, very young age.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've used the primal word there. Obviously, often in this adoption space, when we hear the primal word, it's followed by wound, right? Have you felt primarily wounded?
No, I would have to be
No.
honest by saying I really don't. Uh, Nobody's life is perfect. We all have
Yeah,
issues and we've all had mistakes, but I feel, you know, extraordinarily grateful because of that primal feeling that I have about who I was and where I came from.
yeah, yeah. That makes you quite different, I think.
Yes, yes, very much so.
Yeah. So, I refer to my primal wound as like a paper cut, right?
Mm.
So it's very, very, very short, very, very short and very fine. And some primal wounds at the other end of the spectrum look more like a great white shark has taken a chunk out of somebody's leg. Right?
Oh wow, yeah.
It's a bad one. Um, and but I don't know if I've ever found anybody that doesn't feel that. Was there a degree of questioning? Yet you've talked a little bit about that.
Of questioning in terms of.
Questioning your background. So you perhaps something that is less emotional than the primal wound, but it was clear to you because you look differently. You look different to your adopted parents, different colour to your adopted parents, right? There was a questioning that went on, but it was done with it was looking at it from a more logical perspective, a less emotional kind of stuff side.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I, I do remember questioning who I was and where I came from at a very young age. Again, I don't remember exactly when I was told that I was adopted, but I do remember having that thought, like, why do my parents look different than I do? And I wanted to find out, and I wanted to find out more about where I came from. So there was that. But for me, the questioning came in was, okay, I'm from this place, but what else is there about me that identifies me as something different than you besides my skin color? And as it turns out, I was, or I am, of Mayan descent. And there's depending on who you ask, there's about 6 to 10 million left of us. But for me, that was huge. That was just enormous for me to know that I am of not Mayan descent, because there's so few of us, and it just helped me feel like I was part of a tribe, part of a um, a bigger something bigger than just me. So there was that, and that was
And
big.
there wasn't a clash between that and your any other parts of your identity. Those two things could sit in peacefully alongside each other.
Yeah, I think I can compartmentalize the two and separate them and keep them separated. But there is a little bit of overlap as well. But I think that's just normal. So
Yeah, but there's no tension between the two.
I wouldn't call it tension. No, I wouldn't call it
I'm not.
tension.
I'm not fishing. I think I'm not fishing. And as I was thinking, like, am I trying to gaslight Andres? If you're wondering if I'm trying to gaslight on, no, I'm not at all. I'm just. I'm giving. I guess I'm looking to explore a different take on this, right?
Yeah.
So because a lot of people struggle with this stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of transracial adoptees struggle with that stuff, and the kind of logical questioning that you're talking about becomes far more emotional. So by exploring this, I think I'm exploring this to show that it doesn't have to be that way, in the same way as when I talk about my primal wound being a paper cut. Right. I'm saying it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be that. I'm putting a different perspective forth, and it doesn't have to be that way. And so my own take on the primal wound, for example, is that for me, and you've been very straightforward and clear. You've been talking about your perspective and your experience. For my experience was that I didn't believe I was primarily wounded until I read The Primal Wound. So there's an extent to which I'd had a couple of intense moments of fear and fear and anger towards my birth mother, but I didn't think that I'd been primarily wounded. But then I didn't. Well, yeah, I didn't see it that way. I just saw these as two kind of random, bizarre thoughts.
Right.
Not as a sign of something far bigger.
Right.
And that's why my primal wound is a paper cut compared to others that I've spoken to, and my heart goes out to them because I know what it felt like. The paper wound, the paper cut felt very intense and painful for the 20, 40 seconds that I had it. And I wouldn't want to wish that on anybody. And also I'm thinking, well, if you've had that intensity that I've had for 40 seconds, for 40 years, or for 20 years, or for 4 years, whatever, then no wonder it feels really, really painful,
Right.
And by introducing a scale of a continuum, a spectrum on which the primal wound can be looked at, then we can hold it up and explore it and hold it up to the light, rather than it being something, and we can see what it's made of, rather than it just being this all-encompassing, dark, dingy place, terrible trauma that we can never heal from.
Yeah, that's very true. I've always kept in perspective the fact that, again, I've had a wonderful life, but I realize also, as I'm doing this endeavor and learning from other people what they've gone through, I've lived, and I said this in a previous episode of mine, that I've lived a very charmed life. And I realized that my wound is basically a bruise compared to other people who, as you said, comparable to a shark bite. And that fact is not lost on me. And I'm very grateful for all that I've had, because I know there's people out there who've had horrible situations. I mean, I take my wife, for example, who went through a tremendously cruel beginning in her life. And that was in a previous episode as well. But the point is that there's a lot that could have gone wrong in my life. And I try to focus on all the stuff that's gone right in my life and how to improve myself and be a better person. So that's, as far as wounds go, that's my perspective.
Yeah. And I think the experience after the adoption kind of gets mixed in with the experience pre-adoption. So the relinquishment trauma and trauma that goes on within the adoptive family can get mixed up. We can separate them out to look at them and to explore them, but really they're very much mixed together in because they happen to one person, right? So separating relinquishment trauma and trauma that goes through it, because, as you said, like a cruel start in life, it is in a way, I don't know what's the word. It's theoretical. It's abstract. It doesn't matter. Separating it's an interesting idea to look at relinquishment trauma and trauma in the family that we grew up with, but those two things happen to one person, so it's all mixed in. It all gets mixed in together, and I kind of feel the same. I say that my life has been a cakewalk, compared to. So my dad was sometimes a little bit tricky, but that was his personality. He was tricky with other people at work. It wasn't anything to do with being what he was like as a father. It was more to do with his personality. He was tricky sometimes, and utterly charming and caring other times, so like if I especially when I was working with him, I kind of like felt the brunt of some of his stuff,
So would you say it was like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of, or not really?
Not as extreme as that. He just if you caught him in a bad mood and you question something that he'd ask me to do, then if I questioned it, he'd give me more work to do. Just it was more like, yeah, I hope my mum doesn't listen to this one, right? Because she'll, it was just, he was an only child, and he was kind of used to getting his own way, should we say, for that, So it was just like, if you went to them, but then it give you, but because it was slightly inconsistent, you didn't really know which way it was going to go.
Right.
Yeah. So you talked earlier on about growth, as in learning from, growing from, as a consequence of going through something that's difficult, and also learning from mistakes. So was there a particular reason that you said that? Growth after mistakes?
Yes. And the reason why I said that was because for the first 38 years of my life, I didn't know that I was bipolar. So at age 38, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1. In that time between being born and being diagnosed, a tremendous amount of bad stuff had happened, like really bad stuff. And I'm not proud of it, but at the same time, it's just part of my life story, who I was. So I think that for me, the growth comes from realizing that there was this situation going on for me that I couldn't help in a lot of ways. I mean, it doesn't, I'm not saying I'm absolved from my wrongdoing. I'm saying that I didn't realize why I was doing what I was doing. And so I think that the growth comes from letting go of that hurt and of the pain and the guilt that I feel for what I've done in my past, and learning from it and growing from that. And I think that's paramount. And without that, there's just, you can't grow if you don't learn from what you've done, good or bad. And so that's where a lot of that comes from.
Yeah. Can you give us any more specifics in terms of the moment when you had your insight along this stuff? Obviously, there must be a moment when you got the diagnosis, right? So let me take you back a bit. So what were the things that led up to the diagnosis? What at some stop you must have thought, I need to check this out. I mean, please share as much as you will.
Definitely be happy to. It's interesting. It's kind of a funny story. The way that I found out was that I was looking at, I was reading some stories online, and it was the Yahoo, we're talking 10 years ago, it was the Yahoo homepage. And on this page, they have news articles flashing in front of you and whatnot. And I started reading about Catherine Zeta-Jones. And I thought, oh, she's a good actress. Let me find out a little bit about her. Well, it went on to say that she was experiencing these symptoms. And I thought, you know what? That's exactly what I'm going through. I'm experiencing that. I didn't know what it was. So then I thought, well, that explains my irrational and erratic behavior. So I went to 2 doctors. Both of them told me no, I wasn't bipolar. And then I went to a 3rd doctor, and I gave, within like 2 minutes of me telling her my symptoms, she says, yep, definitely you're bipolar. And it was this epiphany that I had that, wait a minute, there's a reason why I was such a horrible person in the past. And I'm speaking of myself. I'm not saying that people who are bipolar are horrible people.
Yeah.
I'm saying that my experience and my behaviors were horrible. So I had that epiphany, and it helped me realize that I can be a better person. I can be a better person. I can get the help that I need, and I can do what I need to do to be a better person for the people around me, because I owe them that much. And so that's what I did. And then 10 years later, I figured out with some help from doctors that I am ADHD as well, which makes sense for some of the symptoms that weren't covered with the bipolar. So I did that. And then in 2015, I created the Bipolar Discovery Group on Facebook. And I think it has like 50,000 likes and followers or whatever. I haven't really touched it recently. I've just been so busy. But the point is that I had a chance to look at my life and to say, you know what, you don't have to be this schmuck. You can be a good person. You know, you can be a loving person towards other people and respectful towards other people. And that was it. That's how that happened.
Wow. Has any doctor ever tried to put the two things together?
Yeah, you mean the bipolar and the ADHD?
No, sorry. No, being adopted and having bipolar, or being adopted and having ADHD.
I wouldn't say that they've really tried to put a direct correlation between the two of them. What we do know about bipolar illness as well as ADHD is that it primarily tends to be genetic.
Okay.
And so if you have a genetic predisposition for it, you're more likely to experience some level of that illness.
Okay. So because it's a very straightforward answer. I didn't ask it very well. So they haven't put it together. They haven't put it together because it's mainly genetic rather than situational or whatever.
Correct. Yeah. It's the whole nature versus nurture.
Yeah. It's a nature thing.
Yeah.
Wow. So how has that changed? How has that changed your life over those 20 years or so?
It's I don't even know where to begin. It's changed my life so much. Back when I was a kid, they did the testing for ADHD and bipolar. Well, just they did testing on me, and I was a kid. But we're talking 1970s when this happened, like early 80s. They didn't have the knowledge that they have now. So I basically slipped through the cracks. And my life it's been a good life. Please don't get me wrong. It's been a good life, but I've made some horrible mistakes. And I've hurt a lot of good people. I'm not proud of that, but it's just, again, that's part of my history and part of who I am or who I was. I think that there could be, had I learned earlier about all this illness, I think my life could have been different had I been on medication, had I had the opportunities that, with the opportunities of the medication back then, if they had it back then, I could have had a different life. But the life that I have has been good despite those flaws and follies.
Yeah. So were you tested in the 70s as a matter of course, or because of some of the behaviors that you were showing?
That's a good question. My parents told me, I don't remember it, but my parents told me that I was tested. I don't know if it was for any kind of behavioral issue or if it was because it's a standard testing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that I've always had trouble learning. I've always had trouble concentrating. But I was marked clear, so nobody really thought anything of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
and how does I mean, you refer, I talked about my dad and you said, was it like Jekyll and Hyde? And I said, well, maybe not quite as extreme as that. Is that what bipolar looks like? It looks like Jekyll and Hyde.
it varies from person to person. Um, for me, I'm a high functioning individual in terms of I'm able to live my daily life and, you know, just be kind of quote unquote normal. Um, but for some people, it's very disruptive in their daily lives. They have a hard time functioning and being present and treating other people with respect, or treating themselves with respect. There is a high suicide rate with people who are bipolar. I consider myself very fortunate with the fact that I'm able to think through things and put myself in a hospital if I need to go there, which has happened a couple of times in my life. But it's not a reflection on the person as an individual of who they are, when their integrity or their character. It's their what I tell people, it's their brain lying to them, telling them these untruths about themselves, and that's where the problems come in. So that's
Yeah,
that's how it's been.
yeah. And did you encounter any other adoptees in the bipolar space, in the bipolar community?
I haven't yet.
Oh, okay.
I haven't yet, but I'm sure there's lots out there.
Yeah, but you probably would have done though if because you were so involved in the group. Like
Yeah.
yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's in the spaces that I hang out, looking at consciousness. Looking at awareness and who we are underneath our thoughts and feelings. I don't find any adoptees at all in those spaces.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like
Interesting.
they don't hang out in that. So I
Huh.
don't know what that says. I'm in groups and have been in lots of groups looking at this stuff. And I guess it's pretty far out. Most people are focused on psychology rather than consciousness.
Yeah, sure.
Consciousness stuff.
Sure. And there's a big there is a stigma behind or associated with mental illness. And I think a lot of people shy away from admitting something like that because they think, oh, well, there's a stigma attached to it, and people are going to think this or that of me and whatnot. I know for me, when I was diagnosed, it was like, I think I even started tearing up because it was an explanation for my behavior. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. And I finally knew why I was doing what I was doing. And I said to myself, now I can be a better person, and I can work on treating people better and having a better life. Uh, so, not everybody's willing to say, yeah, hey, I'm bipolar, or anything else, even schizophrenic or anything, because of the stigma. And I'm trying to do what I can to help people realize that,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a stigma, but you can work past that. You can grow from the stigma. You can be bigger than that.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to define you.
Yeah. Yeah. So that there's some incredible similarities there between letting bipolar define you and letting being adopted define you.
Yes.
Letting the primal wound define you.
Right.
And you said bigger than that. I keep on name checking a book called High Risk by a guy called Ben Timberlake, who was an adrenaline junkie who became a junkie.
Oh.
Yeah. And he became a junkie because he decided to start take heroin for 2 weeks to see what it was like coming off it. And it took him 5 years to come off it. And he describes the epiphany moment when he started to come off it, or the epiphany moment after which he came off it, shall we say, as he said, I realized that I was bigger than my addiction.
Interesting.
And it's an 8-hour book.
Wow.
And it's an 8-hour book, and it pivots on that one sentence. And he doesn't describe anything other than that. He just says, I realized that I was bigger than my addiction.
Wow.
And the power of that insight did the rest of the work. But he doesn't give you any more than that. It's literally just that one sentence.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's amazing. But that's how big epiphanies are.
Yes.
That's
truly incredible. It really is inspiring.
Yeah, and I name check it because I name check the book because of that thing, right? He all he did is he had a you teared up because you had an explanation of stuff that for doing stuff that you didn't want, you wouldn't have chosen to do. I don't know, would you? Yeah, the stuff that you weren't proud of, I think, is what you said.
Yeah.
And it all turned on that. It all turned on that epiphany moment.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Well, one, seeing a thing by Catherine Zeta-Jones, and two, like having the explanation, and having the diagnosis. Interesting, like it's interesting as well that the first two doctors said no. Right?
Yeah.
They didn't give the diagnosis. The third one said yes. So there's a strange thing. We have this strange thing in the Western world that we think science is a 1 or a 0, don't we? We think it's
very binary.
Think that, it's binary, and doctors know or they don't know. Well, a lot of it is down to opinion.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of it's down to opinion.
And there are people who do get diagnosed with bipolar illness who won't accept it, and they say no, not me. It's something else, and there's that stigma again. And that's their own journey. There's no right or wrong way of responding to it. It's just whatever your particular path is, and so. I've come to realize that because some people have reached out to me and they've said, I've just been diagnosed as bipolar, and I, can't believe it. I wish it wasn't true. And then I try to tell them, now that you can improve your life. If there's something about your life that you don't like that is related to it, you can change that. You don't have to be defined by that, So
like the first step in doing something about something is realizing that there's a problem in the first place. Like you're going to be something about the denial isn't just a river in Egypt or something like that. There is a saying. It's funny with the primal wound. For a bit, I thought I was stuck with it. So your instant reaction to the bipolar diagnosis, as I can do something about this now. My instant reaction to the primal wound was, I'm stuck with this.
Yes.
But luckily that didn't hang around for too long. I was in enough spaces, and spoke to enough people that made me see that actually, in my opinion, as consciousness, who we truly are, awareness, spirit, can't be wounded. It's not a thing. So wounded.
So let me ask you this. So when you did find out about this primal wound
Mhm.
at the time, did you feel it was self-defining?
That's a great word. No, I would say self-restricting.
Okay. Gotcha.
But did I feel I was primarily wounded? Yeah. So that could be self-defining. I guess that could be self-defining. Yeah.
Okay.
It's tricky. 7-8 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
7-8 years ago since I read the book. And so the post-traumatic growth was, for me, was the fact that the primal wound took me down, right? And the metaphor I use for this is, if you've ever been in a swimming pool or in the sea, and you've got a beach ball or a ball and you're trying to push it down underwater. You ever done that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So when you push it down, and it's hard work to push it down, right? You got to really get on top of it. And so, you might push it down a foot. But then when it bounces back higher than a foot. It bounces
Yeah.
back 2 foot. So you've ended up higher, in a better place than where you started out, and a better place than equilibrium, right? So your life has been, my life, whatever it was, 8 out of 10. My life was 8 out of 10. It dropped down to 6 out of 10, and then it bounced up to 9 out of 10. You see what I mean?
Ah,
So the growth, the delta, is between the 8 and the 9.
right. Right.
That's what I mean by post-traumatic growth. You bounce back higher than where you originally were.
When you started. Yeah.
Than when you
That's
started.
I really like that analogy. I really like that. That's really good. I would have never
That's how
thought
I
of
feel.
that.
That's how I feel. I've used that analogy before, but I've never done the numbers. I've never
Mhm.
added the numbers to it. So I think that to me that makes it kind of clearer. One of my favorite
Interesting.
authors, trainers, speakers, mentors. I listen to him a lot, and he says, in other words, so he says, so, or from another perspective, he explains the same thing in about 6 or 7 different ways. So
Interesting.
he'll give you a metaphor, then he'll give you a story, then he'll give you a word, and then he'll give you 4 more words.
Wow.
And it's all the intricacy of it. Okay? Because different things are going to land for different people, right?
Yeah.
So because I know my metaphor of the ball, and I'm talking to you about post-traumatic growth. I
Mhm.
think that you've got the same understanding of post-traumatic growth as I am, and
Yep.
you might have. If I say an oak tree to you, or giant redwood, we think we're picturing the same sort of tree, right?
Right.
But when you say something like post-traumatic growth, my view of what post-traumatic growth could be, and I've just, it may be completely different to yours. So the more detail I can add to it, the more different light and shade, and the more specific I can be, and or different ways I can find of expressing that same thing, the more likely it is for you to land. So I
Yeah.
like the fact, obviously, listening to this guy
Yeah.
has helped me, because I've explained that, I've used that metaphor 10, 20 times, but I've never added the numbers in. Yeah. So my life was an 8 going along. Reading Primal Wound takes me down to 7. Then bouncing back, I bounce back higher, bounce back to a 9, because I realize the mistake that I've made, right? The mistake I love the way that you said that bipolar is you summed it up really succinctly and clearly. You said it's like the brain's telling lies.
Mhm.
Well, I think all of our brains tell us lies, and I would guess that bipolar lies are just turbocharged lies.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a different, it's a difference of degree.
Yeah, I think I think the major difference is that with bipolar, people without bipolar, when your brain tells you lies, then you can, normally you can say, no, that's not true, or you're just having a feeling, you're just having an emotion, just let it go, let it pass. But with people who have bipolar, I think that they don't have that filter. They don't have the way of discerning what is a lie and what's not a lie. And that's where it becomes dangerous, because they start to really believe what their brain is telling them.
Yeah.
And so that's where it gets problematic.
Yeah. So it's just one way. There's no alternative perspectives. It's you're not. That's so. When you said about reconciling, you were weighing up pros and cons. So you had two perspectives. To the weighing up the pros and cons of being adopted.
Right.
In bipolar, there's only cons or only pros. There isn't both.
There are cons hidden or masked as pros.
Oh, right. Okay.
And
all right. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I think I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if you're going through the phase of mania where you're manic, you may think of 30 different things you want to do. Write a book, start a podcast, create your own movie, write your own memoirs or whatnot. Just do all kinds of really creative stuff. And what it's your brain just cycling rapid, just spinning at 100 miles an hour. And then when you've just gotten the first word on the page of a book you want to write, then it just poof, it disappears. It goes away. And then you're left with all this stuff that you've bought for a book. Maybe you bought a brand new computer, and then you bought a most expensive printer, and then all this stuff, that all the resources that you've put into this project it has now cost you, 1, a lot of money, 2, a lot of time, and 3, your sanity, because you can't figure out why you wanted to start all these projects, and now you have no interest in them whatsoever. And so it seems like a pro. It seems like a positive thing. I'm going to do all these great things, but it's a con. I mean, in the sense that it's negative, because now you have all this stuff and you're not going to do anything with it. I've been there, done that. At first, when I started this podcast, my own podcast, I thought, is this really genuinely something I want to do, or is this sort of part of my manic behavior? And it's been, I think, about 6 months now. And usually I peter out around, like the second month. And then that's when I say, okay, I'm done with that project, whatever. So it's been 6 months. I'm really into it. I really love doing it. And I really love the idea of helping people and talking to people like you. And just, it's really what I want to do. So, but yeah, it does that.
Yeah. Wow. Is there you got to check out Andres's podcasts, everybody. There's links. It's called The Adoption Door. So links to it in the show notes. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, Andres?
Well, I just want to say thank you very much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. I've had a great time, and I'd love to have you on my show.
Yeah, let's make that happen. Thank you very much, listeners. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you again very soon. Bye-bye.